really hang a lot. So
Oh,
they won't see your pretty face. I'm sorry.
oh, that's all right. That's all right. At least you got to see about 2 minutes of it, so that's okay.
All right. So anyway, we wanted to talk about the Paul McCartney's dead conspiracy. And so yeah, we were saying that I started researching it on August 1st, 2008. So that's about 11 years now. And I'm an attorney in Washington State, and I have a master's in Germanic Studies. I have a JD, which is a Doctor of Jurisprudence, and I also have an LLM, which is an advanced law degree. And I've
Excellent.
also published law review articles. So I have a really strong background in research and writing. So I just applied that to the Paul is dead conspiracy theory. And I had the blog Plastic Maca for about 10 years, and then I turned all of my research into a book, which was called Plastic Maca: The Secret Death and Replacement of Beatle Paul McCartney. So that's basically my background. And I know you wanted to talk about some things that were going on in the Paul is dead community right now.
Yeah,
And why
yeah,
don't you tell me more about that?
yeah. So, basically, as you know, I've read your book about 3 times now, and
Is that
also
all?
I've also skimmed through it, and I've also seen just so many different things that resonate towards it being factual, as opposed to some things in the PID community being fiction, and I wanted to separate the facts from the fiction in the book, and having been reading your blogs and doing a lot of research by a lot of great different researchers that are out there in the community. I think we have to sort of come to we sort of have to realize that the Paul is dead conspiracy is something that has to be brought to the surface. It's something that has to be talked about because we are honoring a great musician who, unfortunately, as far as we know, his life was cut short by his because of what he stood for and because of what he did for the 5, 6 years that he was at the top of his game when he was in the Beatles, being Paul McCartney. So, Tina, first I wanted to talk to you about Theodore Adorno, who was a philosopher from Germany, I believe, or Austria. I'm not
Well, no,
100%.
he was German. He was part of the Frankfurt School, which was yeah, I mean, he's a philosopher in the Frankfurt School.
Yeah, and he was around. He was born in the late 1880s, I believe, and he died around 1969, which was coincidentally around the time when the Beatles broke up. And I just wanted to talk to you about the so-called manufactured um, songwriting that Theodore Adorno supposedly did. Could you elaborate on exactly what you have heard and whether you can tell us if it's true or not?
Yeah, so I did talk about this in the book a little bit because there is some disinformation going around that the Beatles did not write their own music. And that claim is based on uh, basically an unsupported claim that John Coleman made in his book, The Committee of 300. So the memoirs of Billy Shears, which is a fictional story, appears to have taken up that cause and perpetrating the story that the Beatles didn't write their own music and that Theodore Adorno did. But it's complete. It's just unsupported. It's not true. So I have had to take time to refute a fictional story, which is it's not the best use of my time, but I want to I want to set the record straight on this, and I'm also working with Tony Nowhere Man, who recently did a video on voice prints because he worked with the university in Holland, and they did voice print analysis. So he had a lot of trouble getting his video published because YouTube and Vimeo both took it down right away. But anyway, it is now on Brighteon, and there's a link to it on my blog. But anyway, Tony is a good researcher, and we're working together. And Andrew, you've also helped with the research on this, so I'm going to give you credit. Um, anyway, so I've been putting together some information that just proves this claim that the Beatles didn't write their own music. So let's see. Memoirs claims that they didn't write their own music, but then it contradicts itself by saying that Paul wrote "Yesterday in a Dream," which is actually something that Paul said, the fake Paul, because yeah, and I talk about that in the book. There's like, there's Paul in an interview. He talks about how he went about the creative process of writing Yesterday. He had these rhymes, and then it just sort of, he worked on it, and then Fall says that he came up with it in a dream because he knows he can't write a song like that. So what else is he gonna do, really? Like he's claiming some sort of paranormal muse inspiration that struck him because he knows he doesn't have it in him to write the song. But anyway, so the point is that Memoirs contradicts itself, and then it also contradicts itself by saying that Paul wrote "I am down" because he was supposedly down in the ground in a grave. And then Paul also wrote "We Can Work It Out" about his upcoming death somehow, which I'm not sure how that's supposed to tie in. But so you see, there's the claim in Memoirs, and then it contradicts itself at least three times. Like I haven't picked it apart yet, really. This is just some initial research. So do you want to say more about that? Because I do have a ton of stuff, but we can stop and discuss these different topics.
Well, just in regards to Paul writing Yesterday, there's the so-called official story that Paul wrote the song by thinking about it in a dream. He got up, he went to the piano, and he started writing it. But I just came across a sentence, or a quote in your book. If you don't mind me reading it, it's just very, very quick.
No,
it's just in regards to Yesterday, where Paul McCartney said that he wrote it in a dream, and then Paul, the biological Paul McCartney, said he goes, he was mulling over the tune yesterday. So he said that he suddenly started getting these little one-word openings to the verse, and he started to develop the idea. So, for example, he started going da da da, yesterday, suddenly, funnily, merrily, and yesterday. And then he said, all my troubles seem so far away. It's easy to rhyme those, saying things like say, nay, today, away, play, etc. There's a lot of rhymes, and those fall in quite easily. So I gradually pieced it together from that journey. Suddenly, and be again, another easy rhyme. So E, me, tree, flea, and we. And I had the basis of it. So basically, Paul got the idea of Yesterday by just rhyming words together and then putting it all together in a sort of nice little 2-minute tune. But then you have Paul, which has sort of gone the memoirs way, which is or the sort of spiritual occultic way, which is that he thought this up in a dream, and he went to the piano and he started writing it, and then the song just came about. And then he said that, I think, which I presume is a case of disinformation, that he wrote Yesterday first. When he wrote Yesterday, he came with the tune of Scrambled Eggs, which I don't know if that's true or not. Do you think that's true?
I actually did find that Paul called it Scrambled Eggs because Maureen Cleave mentioned it in an article that was written before Paul was on the scene. Yep. So Paul did call it Scrambled Eggs, but
Yeah.
So, because I was wondering that too for the book, because I didn't want to make any claims that weren't true. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
and,
that and yeah, it's just that's the only thing that sort of got me was that you know, he's telling this story for so long, but it's not really the right story, or at least it's. See, the thing is that even especially in your book, Tina, is that at least you have the references and the footnotes to back it up. So it does make it more factual than what the other books say out there. Tina, I just wanted to sort of change pace a little bit, if that's okay. I wanted to talk to you about the personality traits of Paul versus Four because I'm one of those people that likes to look into the psychological aspects of people. I like seeing if there are any fundamental changes to human beings, and over time, I mean, I've been a Beatles fan for 13 years, and I always thought of them as sort of happy-go-lucky, good-natured people that were singing about, all you need is love and give peace a chance, and all those great love songs in the beginning that we grew to, well, that everybody grew to love during the Beatlemania days. But even when I wasn't in the PID circles, I always had a bit of an inkling that something was different after 1966. I don't know what it was, and I've read and oh yeah, so sorry, I watched the anthology series and I've also read the book as well, and even then, just during that part from August of 1966 to December of 1966, there wasn't really anything going on. And after that, when they came back, it wasn't just four in itself or four. It was all of the four Beatles that just came back a little bit different. And the personalities weren't the same as what they used to be. Maybe except George and Ringo, but John and Paul, they definitely changed. So, Tina, can you tell us about the personality traits that were different within Paul and Paul? At least the simple biological traits, if you can.
well, yeah, I mean, there was the songwriting ability is a big difference, and I did want to talk about that more, but there's the generosity factor because apparently Paul was very generous. He gave his girlfriend, Dorothy Roan, a very expensive leather jacket and gave his father a house and a horse, a racehorse. Now, Fall basically would mete out money to Linda as needed for groceries. Like, she didn't have access to money really, and it came out after my book, but I'll put it in the second edition, that Stella McCartney, one of his daughters, said that they hardly ever got any money for anything, and it made her be creative in her fashion and design or whatever. I don't think she's very good, but whatever. Um, and
Yeah,
Heather Mills, Fall's second wife, was very big into charity and all these causes. And she really didn't like that Fall did not give much to charity because he has so much money, he could be more generous. And Fall also kicked his stepmother. Well, this gets a little confusing because it's not really his stepmother and stepdaughter, but whatever. But Paul had given his father a house, and then Paul's father died, and his stepmother and stepdaughter, stepsister were still living there. But like a week after Jim McCartney died, Paul kicked them out of the house, and he also ended their. And well, the stepmother had gotten a salary yeah, she got money, like a pension from Paul or whatever it was he had set
yeah,
up, and then Fall ended it.
yeah,
And so there's also that Fall is not, well, he's just not a very nice person. Like everybody said, oh, Paul was so charming and he was always helpful and he was like easy to work with. Like all these people would say how charming he was. And then Fella's like, "You're not gonna take my picture, and I'm gonna kick your ass." And he actually like pushed somebody
Yeah,
who wanted to take his picture. And I saw another video where he like pushed another camera guy, and then he was even violent towards Heather Mills. Apparently, like he actually cut her with a wine glass, the stem. Like he broke off the glass and he cut her with it. I will
yeah,
cut you, I will cut you. But, and then he like pushed her over a coffee table, and like all this stuff was in her court documents, which are public record.
yeah,
And apparently she also had information that he would hit Linda.
yeah,
That's, I don't know. But then the worst thing, my opinion, is that he came on to a 13-year-old girl when
yeah,
he was, however old he was at that point, like 30. I mean, this was 1973. We don't know how old Fall is, so your guess is as good as mine. But
yeah,
the stepsister was 13, and he is like, "Oh, you're getting really big now." When she was, standing there in a towel, it's like really creepy.
yeah.
So, I mean, Paul, nobody ever said Paul did anything creepy like that. So, certainly never violent.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Paul McCartney, the biological Paul, never really had a scandal in his life. I mean, he was pushed into the bigger than Jesus scandal, but he was never really the forerunner for any sort of big scandal as a Beatle or a public figure. Whereas for McCartney, he's been arrested, he's been put in jail. He went to jail in 1980 when he was in Japan. He was in there for 9 days, and he couldn't actually get out because he didn't actually have the same fingerprints as the original Paul McCartney. So he probably got bailed out by the British government. And he was after that he was allowed to go. Lucky, because he probably would have been in there for a longer time. But in terms of Paul McCartney's attitude and the way that he comes across as a person, you can just definitely tell the difference. I mean, I don't know if it's a sort of fake arrogance or maybe he's just putting it on. We don't know, but the way he comes across, as I said, there's just something different about this guy that isn't really the same as the original Paul. And I think even like a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old can pick up on that. They can pick up on the different personality traits of such a person, especially with Paul or like Paul. So some of the things that Paul said, he said in 1968 when they came back from India, he said that starvation in India doesn't worry me one bit, not one iota. Like he even
Hmm.
said, the truth about me is that I'm pleasantly insincere. So, this guy is going around, and even within 2 years, he's already shitting on biological Paul's legacy. So it just makes me think, why haven't, why don't people, how can people not understand that this guy is not the same guy, the same biological guy in terms of personality traits, which is kind of strange to me. But also, Tina, I just wanted to elaborate on the voice change as well. So the voice change and the voice range, if we can talk about that, because I've been listening to a lot of Beatles stuff recently. Because when you get into the PID thing, you want to sort of examine and analyze everything that you can between the two Pauls. And one of the things that sort of struck out for me was the voice change between the two. So what I mean by that is that the original or biological Paul McCartney up until 1966 had a very, very, very wide range in his vocal. When he expressed himself, his tone was much more richer. His voice never fell flat; it would just keep going. Because I believe he sang through the diaphragm, was it, or the throat?
Yes, the diaphragm. Yes,
The,
absolutely. Hmm.
yeah, so he sang through the diaphragm, whereas Paul sang through the throat. And
Hmm.
you know, I listen to a song like "Here, There, and Everywhere," or "For No One," or even "I'll Follow the Sun," and you can hear that range in Paul's voice. He's very it's like almost like a vibrato. It's very, very, very smooth, but it's a wide range in tone. Whereas for some of his songs, his voice just sort of falls flat, especially in songs like When I'm 64 and Fixing a Hole. It sort of just comes, like when he sings, it sort of just comes to an end every time like every time he says like one of the sentences in the songs. Um, do you think that the vocals are also different as well, in terms of the voice range?
Well, we know the vocals are different because the voice prints show they're different.
Yeah.
But, one thing is that Paul's voice was higher than Fall's,
Yep.
and Fall actually changed the key of Yesterday from Paul was singing it in
F.
G and Fall in F, and it got changed to F sharp.
Yep.
So
And G, I
that
think it was now playing live.
and so it disguises the voice change a little bit that way if you make it higher. But um, so yeah, I mean, I don't think Fall has a particularly good voice. I mean, you won't find me saying very nice things about him anyway, but
Understand.
I
Yeah.
mean, I can't hardly listen to him anymore. It just like makes my blood boil. But um, so the voice prints, the musical ability, the songwriting ability, they're just the way that they play the bass too. I mean, Paul hardly ever looked at the fretboard, and he also played higher on the bass than Fall does. And
Yep.
Fall's constantly looking at the fretboard, and then he plays with a pick, and he's just not as the way he stands, the way he moves. He kind of like Paul would go side to side more, and Fall kind of humps the bass.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
not it, it's not very elegant. Like if you watch the video for Revolution and you watch it without sound,
Yep.
it's really funny how he moves. He's just kind of like a big leg. I don't know.
It
I'm
looks
sorry.
Yeah, you're right because it looks like he's trying too hard to be Paul. Even in Hello Goodbye as well. He does that little weird side leg thing as well where he's trying to be Paul. And really it's kind of cringy because he's like I don't know, he's trying too hard to, I mean, obviously he has to because he's playing the role of Paul McCartney, but um yeah, it's just like little thing. Even in the rooftop concert as well, where like you said, he's pretty much humping the bass, trying to get
Mhm.
that swinging motion in the way that Paul used to, but it just never really, it just doesn't really fit. It's not really the same.
He's
So
not elegant, and see,
no,
Paul was elegant and refined, and Paul is just like a big leg, and I mean that's how I see him, just very coarse and kind of yucky. And that's something too, is like since I'm a woman and whatever, like we pick up on things that men don't necessarily. And like Paul, he's much more attractive physically than Fall is.
yeah,
And,
definitely, yeah,
and it's not just the looks, it's like the way about them, and the way they move. And I mean they're like so many subtle things that go into attraction, and it's like one is attractive and one isn't, like hot to not. And it's just I guess women can see it more, but
Well, Paul, the original Paul, he had charm. John Lennon called him Paul McCharmley back in the Beatlemania days because he was, as we know, he was the cute Beatle. And all of a sudden, after 1966, he wasn't really like that anymore. I mean, he tried to put it on a couple of times. I know that there's an interview with he and John in 1968 where they're sort of sitting next to each other, and you can kind of see you could cut the tension with a knife in that interview. It's amazing. Sure that you've seen that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and in that interview, I mean, I think I'm pretty sure I've said this to you before that that's when he was acting like Paul the most around that time in 1968 when they sort of came back from India, and he might have he might try and connected with Paul's soul or Paul's aura and sort of brought it into himself. But I think once the Beatles broke up, he sort of stopped being Paul McCartney. He just sort of he played the role of Paul McCartney, but he didn't become Paul McCartney during that time.
Oh.
And I think after 1970, after they broke up, he just sort of he was still Paul McCartney, but he was more of himself, whoever he may have been. So he sort of you can tell that he wants to really, really get rid of that image of being Paul. He sort of wants to have his own legacy, but he can't because he signed up for that, and he can't get out of it, unfortunately. So he has to live with the consequences.
Oh.
Tina,
I think he resents Paul and the other Beatles, and I think that he's jealous, and it's sort of like a sibling rivalry situation. But
yeah,
since you brought up India, there was another claim in memoirs that the Beatles went to India to put Paul's soul into Paul's body.
yep,
Now, that claim comes directly from the 60th document, which came out in 2002, so about 7 years before Memoirs came out. And
yep,
the quote from the 60th document is, now this is supposedly George Harrison talking, but of course it isn't, and you can pick this dumb thing apart, but
yeah,
so George Harrison supposedly says, the trip in India was our attempt to put Paul's soul into Paul's body, but of course it didn't succeed. Yes, I know it was a crazy idea, but we were almost going out of our heads with grief.
yeah.
So that's just lifted right out of something else. So another item to expose memoirs with.
Yeah, but do you think they went over there for a purpose musically, or do you think it was a spiritual purpose, or do you think they went over there to push the agenda of the whole, Eastern mysticism and transcendental meditation, drugs, and all that stuff? What do you think it was?
Well, Well, what I think is that the Beatles were getting interested in Eastern religion, and I talk about in the book how uh, meditation is a way to break free of mind control and really get outside of the control box. And the Beatles were moving in that direction. I think that's another reason the controllers didn't like it. The powers that be did not want people to start looking at the East at all.
Yeah,
So the Beatles were really into it, so they couldn't just like turn off the switch like that. So I think they went ahead and had the Beatles or the fake Beatles continue with that charade that they were interested. But
yeah,
look what happened. John Lennon or whoever that was
yeah,
totally discredited Mahesh Yogi by saying that he groped some girl, which
yeah,
probably not even true. Like I don't think it was true, but they had to shut that down. So
yeah,
as soon as he said that, I was like, oh, well, it's all a fraud, and then they don't have anything to do with the East anymore, and people lost interest in India and ancient philosophy and the Vedas or whatever, and weren't gonna be doing well. I mean, they have yoga, but like yoga now, what they have for popular culture is not real yoga. It's
yeah,
it's not like, oh, we're gonna connect to God now. It's like, no, we're gonna do, some dumb position, which I mean the positions have a purpose, but you have to have them in the context of, you're connecting to God through this position. It's not just, oh, I'm doing downward facing dog just to see if I'm flexible. That's not yoga.
yeah.
So it's a very like watered down version of yoga that they have here. And I really don't think they want people to get into the East because it'll free your mind.
Well, that's right, and I think when it comes to meditation, yoga, and stuff like that, I mean, the Indians have been doing it for thousands and thousands of years, and we just follow trends here in the West, and we'll follow what's good in the moment, and I think we just sort of went along with what was going on over there because, like we sort of just we'd pick and choose what we could get from the East to bring it over and sort of make it into something that would fit the agenda. And like you said, once John Lennon discredited the Maharishi, people started to care less after that. So I think, yeah, you're probably right in terms of they they did go over there for a purpose to meditate and find some truth and sort of get away from all the craziness that was going on in the UK and in America. But yeah, when they came back, I thought John just sort of said, "Nah, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to say this story, and hopefully people will believe it." But I think he also said it at a time when he was just pissed off with everything. So that would have been like 1970 or so. He would have said that.
No, 68.
I was 68 in the same year.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, he was just pissed off anyway. um, Also, Tina, I just wanted to talk about the quality of the music. You know, when Biological Paul up until Revolver, when he put music on the albums, a lot of the songs were definitely quality. He'd probably only have about 4 or 5 songs, being the primary songwriter or one of the primary songwriters. He would probably only put a handful of songs on the albums, but most, if not all of them, were of a high quality. If you look at the songs on Revolver, you got Here, There, and Everywhere, For No One, Got to Get You Into My Life, Eleanor Rigby, and what was the other one? Good Day Sunshine. All quality songs, all well thought out. Even in Rubber Soul as well, you got Drive My Car, Michelle, You Won't See Me, I'm Looking Through You. Yeah, when he put on songs, he put them on with intent and purpose. Fall, on the other hand, looking back on what he produced in the beat, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, Paul did write, or he made songs that were of a good quality. He would write some pretty decent tunes, and but he put a lot of crappy songs that were just it was quantity over quality. Wild Honey Pie, I Will, Road, Maxwell Silver Hammer, Fixing
Did you
the
say, did you say Rocky Raccoon already?
Rocky
Or
Raccoon,
or
yes.
Oblazi, Oblaza? Oh my god.
Yeah, I did mention to you that I did like that song because I
I'm
don't know,
sorry.
it's so cheesy. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why, but yeah, I just like that song. But with yeah, like I don't know. I feel like Paul was just making music for the sake of it, whereas Paul would put all his heart and soul into it because it was his. Well, it was Lennon's band, but but Paul, he was obviously one of the main songwriters, so he put a lot of effort into the music. Do you think that the quality and quantity thing is true? Do you think that the music was different?
I do actually have a theory on that because Paul was an enormous talent. Was
Mm-hmm.
a quote from Maureen Cleave, and Fall not so much. So he keeps trying. He keeps putting out all these songs, hoping that one will be as good as Yesterday or Eleanor Rigby.
Yeah.
So he just doesn't have the chops though. Like it's never gonna happen. But he does keep putting it out, hoping that critics will approve one day, and that he'll at least match Paul. I don't think it's ever gonna happen, but
Well, how about a song like "Hey Jude," which was number 7 in the Rolling Stones 500 Greatest Songs of All Time? That
yeah.
is the highest Beatles song that's actually in the countdown. So, in the list. So, I think that's number 7. I believe "Yesterday" is number 13. So,
Well, Yesterday is like ranked like the best pop song ever, but I
yeah,
think Paul left behind quite a lot of material for Fall to Mine. Like he said he recorded everything and he had written even back in '62, and October '62, they did an interview, and he said they'd written about 100 songs
Yeah.
and hadn't even used half of them yet. So, and they recorded everything. So, yeah, there are probably a lot of recordings. Like, we know Paul saying She's Leaving Home, even though it was post, it was after his disappearance that it
Yeah.
came out in '67. And also, his voice is in Penny Lane. So he's
Yeah.
not the main singer, but it's in the chorus. So he may have also written Penny Lane or most of it or whatever he did. So I think that these songs that are these better songs that Fall wrote, like Maybe I'm Amazed and Hey Jude and Let It Be, these songs that are not, halfway bad,
Yeah.
probably something that Paul had been working on or, recorded or did whatever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that Fall just took him and finished him off. But who knows what, it's like When I'm 64 was something that Paul wrote when he was 15.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and who knows if he would have ever even put that on an album, but they
Well, Paul
they
did
made.
say. Sorry,
Mhm.
I'll just quickly elaborate on that. Paul did say that, I think it was in 1963. He said we got hundreds of songs that we've written, but we can't record them because we don't have enough time. So Paul probably just wrote song after song after song that never got released, and Paul probably said, "All right, well, I've got all these songs now. I'm going to put them out there and claim them as my own, or claim them as quote Paul McCartney, and I'll keep putting these out." But honestly, I think the quality of the music had declined after 1973. After, I'd say, Band on the Run, because the albums after that just weren't up to any type of higher standard. I know that Band on the Run, and I'm talking about like the critics, what they think. They say it's the best Paul McCartney album ever made, best Paul McCartney solo album ever made, and one of the best Beatles solo albums ever made. But then after that, the albums that he came out with weren't really that crash hot. They didn't even, some of them didn't even go to number one. So it just makes me think that after, I'd say, Band on the Run, that Paul started to realize that he couldn't take any songs from Paul anymore, and he probably just so he had to write his own things. Do you think that may be true, or do you think that may be
Yes,
different?
I think that's a reasonable assumption. I mean, Fall was writing. He wanted to write with other people a lot. He wrote with Denny Lean, Miliv Kantar, which
Yep.
is, one of his bigger hits. And then he also wanted to write with Mel Evans, so Fixing a Hole and the Sgt. Pepper, theme song he wrote with Mel Evans. And he wanted to write with George Harrison, and apparently he was desperate to write with John Lennon after the breakup.
Yeah.
And Paul didn't really need to write with other people. He wrote Yesterday on his own, Eleanor Rigby, like he was fine writing on his own, but Paul just he needed somebody else because he wasn't as talented.
Yeah, he did say that he wanted to write with John again, and he wanted to write with George again, but George George said, "No, I don't," because obviously they don't really get along, and he said that. Well, I believe he said Paul had how do you
Run
say, he
out.
ran
He
out of
ran
songs.
he ran out of
So,
good songs on his own, yeah.
yeah,
Of his own. Which
and
is
the
like as a clue, like he ran out of good songs of his own, which is like, well, he ran out of Paul's songs that he could mine. That's
exactly.
how I read it.
Exactly, because if you look at, pre 1967, George and Paul were best of friends, and Paul was George's best man at his wedding, and they were really really close. And then all of a sudden they're just mortal enemies, and they don't talk to each other for a long time. But we can probably go into that another time. Now, Tina, I know that you sort of had to go soon, so I won't keep you too long. I just wanted to ask you, Paul McCartney's date of death, or supposed death. You state that it's in Seattle in August the 25th, 1966. Memoirs claims it's in September 11th of 1966. There's been other sources that have stated it's in November the 9th, 9/11, 1966. And then there's also the rumor that there, which I don't think anyone really believes, is that he died January 7th, 1967. Let's focus on August 25th or September 11th because it's usually explained in the blogs and memoirs and all that stuff. Why do you think it's August the 25th, and why do you think it's not September 11th? I'll just quickly state that I'm now convinced that it's going the way towards August the 25th because there are a lot of subtle differences that with Paul in the LA press conference in August the 28th. He did seem a little bit nervous, like holding his hand down at his belt the whole time with his left hand, I believe it was. And he was always putting his hand up to his face, trying to cover himself. And he just said a couple of weird things during that time. And I think he just wasn't really all there. And even John just seemed very, very nervous and tense and angry and whatnot. And then sort of just after that, you don't see them anymore. You don't see the Beatles for those 4 months or whatever it is. And, it's just like they never existed. So, Tina, can you explain why it would be August the 25th and why it wouldn't be September 11th?
Yeah, sure. So Tony Nowhere Man, he did the voice Prince, and he actually said that I was right about the interviews that it wasn't Paul at LA, and
Yep.
but I think that's going to come out more, and we'll talk about that more. But so the reason why people think it's September or November of '66 was because one, Fred LeBour made up a story back in 1969, when people were first talking about well, not first talking about PID, but when it became bigger news.
Yep.
And he looked at the clues, and he looked at the album covers, he looked at the songs, like, okay, Paul died in November 69, like November 8th, November 9th, 69, like, oh yeah, it's a stupid bloody Tuesday or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that became part of the lore. And then, there's the drum on Sergeant Pepper. When you hold up the mirror to it, it says, when X he die. And so people are like, oh, that's either November 9th, 11/9, or September 11th.
Yeah.
And so, but it doesn't mean that that's a date or anything. That's how people have interpreted it.
Yeah.
So all of this stuff was going on in the forums. Well, the author of memoirs, he sees this in the forums. He's like, oh, September 11th, because that's the same day as 9/11. The events of 9/11 with the occult symbolism, whatever, why they picked that day to bring down the Twin Towers and all of that.
Yeah.
So then that's been pushed as the date. But I just go by the facts and the evidence. And what I see is, like, you see Paul in Seattle on August 25th, 1966, and then you don't see him again after that.
Yeah, because
So
that was
yeah.
definitely Paul in Seattle.
Yeah. And so, like, that's the last time you have a known confirmed sighting of the real Paul McCartney. After that, I don't think it's him anymore. So then what was he? I mean, the September 11th date is just pulled out of a hat.
Yeah.
In November, and we know we can dismiss November because fall was already going to Kenya, like, mid-November, and so that's definitely not Paul.
I think he
And
was
then
he left. Hey, wasn't it? Or
yeah, he'd already left, or and there were no recording sessions during that period, and all of the story that has been going on for 50 years, like, a lot of it is bunk. It really is.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to try to say, okay, here are the facts and like what really happened. And I don't care about the story that people have been telling who haven't really researched it.
Yeah.
So, and then January, of course, like that's just dumb because we know, okay, we know it's fall in November, and then we know it's fall in December in front of EMI. So
Yeah.
what? Like, where's Paul? Like, what he fell in Jane Asher's bathroom from a heart attack? Like, come on, nobody believes that. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure some people who are like very new and very naive and have no clue about anything, haven't read my book, they might buy it, but they're just throwing a lot of disinformation at this thing at the moment. But so yeah, that's why I think it's Paul, and I think that's why it's that day of August 25th. Now it might have been, it was at some point between the press conference in Seattle on August 25th, 66, and then Paul's appearance in LA on August 28th.
Yeah.
And there were 2 days of downtime in LA. So I think that they used that time for last minute preparation for the double. But Paul could have been taken out in Seattle or anywhere up until that press conference. But I do think it happened in Seattle because Seattle sounds like Beatle, Beetle, it's close.
Yep.
And then there are a lot of clues about that it happened, like the water, like it was involved with water. But of course, anywhere on the Pacific coast could be water.
Yeah.
Um, but then there's also like the walrus, the I am the walrus, which is a big clue. And even in Glass Onion, it says the walrus was Paul. So that's like definitely a clue. And that came out before people were really talking about the Paul is dead
That's
um,
right.
conspiracy. So why would they need to put a clue in a song like nobody's even talking about it or thinking about it? So anyway,
Why,
so the
why would
wall.
they why would they put out a clue in Sleepless in Seattle as well?
Yes, exactly. See, so the Walrus Building downtown Seattle, the Arctic Building, has like all these walruses.
Yep.
And then Sleepless in Seattle, they have just this random scene where the kid's like, "Hey, Dad, did you know Paul is dead?" It's like, where did that come from? So yeah, it's Seattle. They're connecting it to Seattle, not.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, the LA thing is that, well, Blue Jay Way, I waited in LA for my friends to come, but they never did.
Yeah.
So that could be they never came from Seattle. Like
Yeah.
he's waiting in LA, but they never came. So, and I go through this in the book, and it's just picking through like reverse speech and
Yeah.
song clues and just other clues that have come out. But yeah, so.
Also, I'm just looking through the tour dates for the 6 to 66 tour, and they never had a day off up until the 25th of August. They had one day off when they went from St. Louis to New York, but that was probably just because they didn't have enough time to do the concert the next day, which was 21st of August. But on the 25th they had their show in Seattle, and then on the 28th they were in LA. So do you think that it might have been premeditated that they got rid of Paul, or do you think that it was just perfect timing that they were able to do it there and then?
No, I'm sure it was premeditated. It was well planned out, and they had fall ready and waiting in the wings. Like that guy had been prepared and trained. Because
Yeah.
if it had been an accident, that's why I dismissed the accident story. Because you see Paul, and then 2 days later you see Fall. Well, where did they get this guy so fast, and how is he so well prepared to pretend to be Paul, where he actually does trick a lot of people?
Yeah,
And like,
it really
okay,
does.
so Paul dies in an accident on August 25th or whatever. And then they're just, oh, we're going to find a double and get him ready to pretend to be Paul in 2 days. Like, no, that's never going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, first of all, they would be distraught. They wouldn't be thinking straight. Like, they'd be worrying about, funeral plans and memorials, not let's get a double here and,
Yeah.
to pretend to be our friend that just died in a horrible accident. No,
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense.
But
So I,
that. That's what I never got, is that how they could just keep a brave face during that time. The other three, how they could actually just not
Well,
breathe
we,
and yeah,
we don't know what they were told about what happened.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like they could have been told or threatened or blackmailed or anything to keep up the front.
yeah,
So that to me that's not I mean it is a little bit troubling in how did the other three just pretend and go along, but there must have been something that was convincing them to do that. I
yeah,
mean, they if it's the people, the Illuminati, like really high up people, like I think it was, because I don't know who else would have the clout to pull this off, especially controlling the media and all of that.
yeah,
Like these people can get to your kids, they can
yeah,
get to your grandma, they can get to your cat. I mean, they are ruthless.
yeah.
So, and Heather Mills was getting death threats. Mal Evans, they actually used the LA police as
Mm-hmm.
to take him out. I mean, that's pretty scary.
And 10 years after, I believe,
Yeah.
1976.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, 76 because he was gonna release his tell-all book
yeah,
and his honeypot girlfriend seems like she set him up, got him
mm,
got him taken out, you know,
unreal.
yeah, murder by cop basically. So
Yeah, unbelievable. I think well, I'd like to talk about Mel Evans more next time if we can, because I
yeah.
know that we're running short. So I'll let you go. But I just wanted to just talk about Plastic Macca. You released the book earlier this year in 2019, so all of the clues, everything is basically up to date. I think the latest clue would have been Egypt Station, Paul McCartney's or Fall's latest album, which was released last year, September 2018. So everything is up to date. All the clues are there. There is something like 2,500 references, I believe, and you put all the footnotes in, so they're all there for the people who like to look at facts more than fiction. So all the footnotes are there. There is pretty much piece of every bit of information is there in the book. There's nothing really left out. I know that you might have come across stuff after you wrote the book that you wanted to put in there, but
Oh,
uh,
Andrew, I was finding stuff up until the day that I published it. So I
oh,
was,
wow.
I just, I started putting all the stuff together for a second edition. So that'll come out in a year or two probably. But yeah, there's more. Like practically every day Fall says something or does something that is like, oh God, oh no, you didn't. It's like he's always saying something like, um, God, even just recently he said something like, well, I don't know, whatever. But
I
so
appreciate.
yeah, there'll be some more information. That
Yeah,
actually made me just think, the Egypt station. Did I even put the Illuminati references in the book? I,
you did,
I
yes,
did.
yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah.
Phew.
You
All
you
right.
covered, you did, yeah, you covered a lot of Egypt Station actually, because I presume when you were researching it, it was brand new, like the album had just come out, and there was there would have been so many signs and symbols and little clues and stuff in there that you would have picked up on. So you did put them in the book, which is good.
Oh,
And
good.
for everybody listening, I'd just like to say to get Tina's book, Plastic Macca, The Secret Death and Replacement of Beatle Paul McCartney. It's probably, you can get it on Amazon.com, I believe. And I think, can you get it on Kindle? You can't get it on Kindle anymore, yeah?
No, not anymore because it has so many footnotes and it's just not really suitable for an ebook.
Oh, okay, yeah,
So,
but you can get it on Amazon.com. I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic book. It basically tells you everything that you need to know about Paul is dead. And it's not just Paul is dead as well. It goes much, much deeper than that. We talk about the Illuminati. We talk about the agenda that they were pushing in the 60s. We go into how the Tavistock Institute put their influence into the Beatles, and how they were associated with the death of Paul McCartney. There's just so many different things in here that, it just keeps you guessing and guessing and guessing. And I mean, you can take it both ways. You can sort of see it as something that is life affirming in terms of, now you know the truth. It may hurt, but at least you know that once you know this, you can't really be deceived again. Or it can really, really just bring you down, and not in a bad way. It means that the book was so good that your whole life has just been shattered. So the for the people who have just started coming into Paul is Dead, I would just sort of scrap all the other stuff and just go straight to the book, because it has everything in there. So, so I think we'll leave it at that for today, Tina. And I think we should do another interview sometime if you like. I think
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd
we
be
can
fun.
delve deep into it more. I wanted to talk to you about things like even Jane Asher, talk about the astrology of it all, Bible code, Saint Paul. I want to talk about even the condensed cream of the Beatles as well. I think that's a pretty interesting thing to talk about too. Just the before and after things in interviews. So, for example, John saying, yeah, we're going to tour. After he was asked, are the band's going to come back in 1967? John said, yeah, we'll come back and tour. I think that's just our normal thing that we do now. And then after that, they just didn't tour anymore. So we'll talk about things like that. And so Tina, thank you very much for taking your time out to be with me today. And I really, really appreciate all the work you've done, and keep fighting and keep up the great work.
Well, thank you, Andrew. It's been really fun. I hope you have a good weekend.
Yeah, same to you. All the best. I know it's Friday over there, so enjoy your weekend. We're already here on Saturday, so we're time traveling.
Well, let me know what happens tomorrow, okay?
Probably not much.
All right. Well, you take care. I'll see you on Facebook.
No worries. See you later, Tina. Have a good
Okay.
one. Bye.
Bye.